Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. I got a topic today. It's eventually going to be an article, but look, there's no secret outside right now in our industry. Site networks are the new rage. It's where all the money is being deployed. Everyone's talking about it. Judy, my colleagues Judy Galindo and Ronik from Patient A's, Judy from Latinos in Clinical Research, just came back from SCRS, one of the big conferences out there. All there are site networks. Me personally, I went a few months back, investigator meeting. There were like 130 sites. Half the sites, I kid you not, half the sites were site networks. So you might be watching and thinking, okay, I own a site. What's the benefit of joining a site network? What's the pros and cons? How do I go about doing this? I'm in the middle of, with Yuma Clinical Trials, I'm in the middle of exploring that as a possibility for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think it's a potential opportunity. I don't think it's without its risks. I don't think it's without its downsides as far as remaining independent. But I do think there are enough upsides for it to be interesting enough for me to explore. Namely, a lot of things we'll get into, but access to capital, and if you get partnered with the right private equity firm and at the right time, you can actually do a lot of things as far as growth. And I feel like that's something that I'm ready to take on as a challenge. Myself, Chris Sauber, Jaime Valles, we're all exploring that, but we're totally okay remaining independent. I actually do think there's still a lot of value in remaining independent. I still think the majority of sites, if you exclude academic medical centers, are not part of a site network, but that dynamic will probably change in the next 5 to 10 years to where we will see more sites as part of site networks. At that point, I think it would be smarter to go back to being independent. No real reasoning behind that, just the fact that I'm a contrarian. So when others zig, I like to zag. I'm going to go through some personal experiences of what I'm going through right now, some situations as far as potential opportunities for small sites joining site networks. And actually, like I said, I wrote an article about this because Chris and I got interviewed by some publication the other day on site networks and private equity. And I'm writing an article which I could use as like a framework for the talking points for this video. So the first question you might want to ask is, what is a site network? And that's actually a very good question. No one seems to have a definitive answer. You just kind of know it when you know it. There are back in the day, so the late 90s, early 2000s, there were site management organizations. And these were organizations. Now remember, research was a lot less mature back then. Not a lot of tech, not a lot of ways to streamline multiple sites. So site management organizations were groups that went into clinics, went into doctors' offices, did research within the private practice, embedded themselves within the private practice, and then scaled this. So that's the key word, scaled, because I just did this with Yuma Clinical Trials for a few PIs in Yuma, 5 of them to be exact. And I don't consider myself an SMO because I don't think that's scale. Scaling that would be doing this in Yuma, doing this in Phoenix, doing this in Tucson, doing this in San Diego, on and on. Now, site networks also scale, but site networks grow differently. Site networks do a lot of their growth via acquisition. So there's different acquisition strategies. Previously, it was the minimum threshold was $1 million in EBITDA. I even wrote an article like back in 2016 on this very topic about what's the right price point if I were an investor in buying a clinic. And I had that $1 million, I had it at gross, provided that the site is managing itself at the proper profit margins, which right now, Yuma Clinical Trials, I just did the profit and loss, is 67% profit margins before owner distributions. And there's three owners that own Yuma Clinical Trials. So before owner distributions, it's 67% profit margins. That's relatively high. There are sites that are higher. Those are the ones that are physician owned and coordinator owned. So really they're only paying like overhead, staff, a few tech solutions that they're using. So 40 to 80% profit margins is the range. I think even if you're trying not to make money, like there's no way you can get lower than 40% profit margins unless you are purposely overspending, or just, I guess nothing's impossible, but you should be within that range, 40 to 80. 67 is a decent profit margin. We actually could be higher if we didn't invest in things like community videos and a lot of tech stuff, because I like to experiment. So I think in the past, site networks, and this was from like 2020 being the past, site networks kind of really got popular after COVID, when there was a lot of money in the market, not just research, but there was definitely a lot of money in research, but a lot of money in the economy because of the financial stimulus packages and rates being almost zero, that there was a lot of fuel pushing private equity to invest in sites. And IQVIA made a big acquisition of a 30-site network. I want to say it's somewhere between 20 to 30 sites, mostly around Arizona and the Southwest. And they paid something like $300 million for the site network. I believe it was either in 2021 or 2022. You guys can just Google it and see. And I think that really laid the foundation for giving more private equity firms the idea, okay, there's actually a market for this. Like, in order for private equity to get excited about something, it has to be a good industry, and it has to be an industry that would benefit from economies of scale. So far, clinical research checks those boxes. And there has to be liquidity in that industry, meaning there has to be a buyer on the other side. So either a buyer or access to public markets, which so far, it's very interesting, so far no site network has gone public, meaning going IPO. The closest we have, it's more like a tech company, but they do their own studies, was Sciences 37, which failed miserably. It became a penny stock, or I think it was a penny stock, and then it became even smaller of a market cap. So clearly the impetus is on brick and mortar sites, not like virtual sites, but real sites in real communities, especially underserved communities, being acquired by site networks, so by private equity. And this is where it gets interesting, because now you got to question motivation on the founder's side, which is the next part of this video. Why would I, as a site owner, join a site network or sell to a site network? And it's two reasons that I've really distilled it down to. It's probably more, but one of them is you can grow quicker and ultimately have a higher return on your investment capital by joining a larger group than by staying independent. And number two is you're either getting bored or you're looking to retire, or your PI is looking to retire. And sometimes these private equities, they have resources that you may not, so they might be able to have a PI replace your existing PI, and they're just connected. The idea is like you can do more with less. So that's one of the reasons. Those are the two main reasons why sites join. There is a third reason, which I don't see as a driving force yet, but I see a lot of sites maybe being afraid about it, which is if there's so much consolidation in this space, at some point I'm worried about being competed out of the market. And that's not a concern yet, so I wouldn't. As a site owner myself, that's right now in the middle of this debate with my team. Should we join a site network? Should we start a site network, or should we remain independent? Those are really your three options. I think there's benefits to all three. In my case, there's only benefits to two. The benefits to the two are either remain independent or become the site network. We've agreed with my team that we will not join a site network, mainly because we're a very new company. Yuma Clinical Trials is not even 3 years old. So there's a lot of value still to be extracted from YCT before we join a site network. And it's important to us that we partner with the right private equity firm that would understand where we are and understand that we are not looking to exit, number one, and we are not bored with running our site yet. And we're definitely not afraid of competition, because in our market, there is zero competition. And we don't even need access to money to grow in our location. So it almost makes no sense for us to sell to a site network unless we are the platform. Now, if an existing site network wants to overpay by double of what the standard is for acquiring sites, which is not going to happen. Right now, the standard for being acquired is 8 to 10 times EBITDA, and this is October 2024. So right now, it's 8 to 10 times EBITDA to be acquired, meaning earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. Unless someone wants to pay me 16 to 20 times EBITDA, I'm not interested in selling my site, because, like I said, we're too new and we're nowhere near maximizing our potential. So being acquired by an existing site network, out of the question. Remaining independent definitely is a possibility, or becoming the site network and attracting private equity to make us what's called the platform. So when you are the platform site, you are the original site that a private equity partners with, gives you access, they buy you out. Usually it's somewhere around 60% of your site that they own, so they get majority control, and you own the rest of the 40. Now the rest of your 40 gets transferred into the site network, which will be a new company, since you're the platform, the new company stock. And they'll typically give you 8 to 10 EBITDA, but the difference is your 40% becomes part of the site network stock. And since you're the first site, or maybe the first 2 or 3, your shares, because there's less value, no value has been created yet as far as the site network is concerned, you get early access to those shares. They're actually worth more, they're less diluted. I'm not going to get into the details too much, but just know it's better to be early if you're going to join a site network than later. And a lot of you guys, I've learned this by taking calls and signing letters of intent and realizing that, maybe not the right fit for us, doesn't make sense for us. And that's called being an add-on site. When you are acquired to be rolled in to an existing site network, you are an add-on site. When you are the one getting the investment from the private equity and you're the first site and you are asked by that group to help grow the site network, you are what's called the platform. And in our case, we're either going to do that or we're going to remain independent. Now, for a lot of people out there, you might want to consider selling, because not everyone gets a chance to be the platform. You have to be pretty well connected or pretty well respected in the space, or you have to really have demonstrated that you know what you're doing very well. And most people, they just supply and demand. That's not the case. Most people just want to sell and move on, or sell and be part of something bigger than they are solo. But if you can get yourself to be a platform, or be as close to the beginning of that platform as possible, it's probably better for you. There are situations where joining at the end of a platform makes sense, because if you are in a crowded market, you better join a site network as opposed to staying solo in that crowded market. So let's say Miami, or let's say Houston, or let's say LA, or let's say Atlanta. Those markets are crowded. There's probably already site networks there. So for you to have a better chance of maintaining your site, joining a site network often could be a lifesaver. Again, for UMA clinical trials, luckily, because there's no competition here, that was not the case. So that's a little bit about the different scenarios of the site networks. Now, there's different ways that site networks run, so you got to do your due diligence. Just like they do their due diligence on you, you got to do your due diligence on them. And you got to look at who are the people running it. Who are they? What are their values? What have their history been as far as, maybe not in research, but in other industries? What have they done? How many successful roll-ups have they had? What was the exit multiple? Because remember, if you're keeping a certain percentage of your shares that are transferred into the company shares when it becomes a site network, you want to make sure you are with a group that can exit and give you an even higher return on your shares than you could have done on your own. Now, there's clearly economies of scale, especially if you're joining a site network later. Maybe you've been a site that uses paper source, and there's definitely advantages to joining site networks for the tech stuff and for what Chris Dixon calls in a book that I recommend called Take Rates. So Chris Dixon wrote this book that I've been reading where he talks about take rates, and he talks about, the book's called Read, Write, Own. Read, Write, Own. And chapter 8 specifically is about take rates. And take rates are essentially Jeff Bezos' entire business model is built around this concept of your profit margin is my competitive advantage. So we're going to eventually get to a point where there's all this consolidation amongst site networks. We're already there with CROs, by the way. They're trying to use tech to be a differentiator, and now the CROs are trying to use owning sites, by the way. A lot of the exit of, remember I said that you need to be in a liquid market to be able to make this attractive for private equity. CROs are the ones that are going to do the buying. And when you build the site network, so let's say what I'm trying to do is be the platform and build the site network from scratch, be the first site, or at least the first 1 or 2 sites, grow to a 30 site network, and then exit it. At this point, the EBITDA should be double. Because these companies, you've demonstrated that you can scale more, you have take rates, you're more competitive in the market. So instead of being 8 to 10x EBITDA for your selling multiple, you're looking at 16 to 20x EBITDA for your multiple. And especially if you can demonstrate that you can continue to grow. Especially if you can demonstrate certain competitive advantages like being in diverse markets, like being in border towns, like having access to Latin America. These are a lot of things that people won't tell you about that are being talked about right now. So I wanted to give Guru Nation some information on this since I'm living it myself. So Chris Dixon, Read, Write, Own. It's a must read, especially chapter 8 on take rates. Now, growing the site network, when you get the site network, or if you are going to be the platform, you're going to learn this the hard way. But if you're an add-on, you should look at what the site network that you are joining has already done. What is their strategy on diverse markets? Do they have one? Are you an add-on, but are you in a market that they need access to? Because now you have some leverage. So even if you're late, even if you're not the platform, because most people won't be able to be the platform, you still have negotiables that you still have competitive advantages. If you're in a market, there's no competition and it's diverse, you can negotiate a better EBITDA for you. And you need to make sure that who you're joining has a strategy for diversity, because that's going to be huge going forward. These diversity recruitment action plans are real. They're not going away. It's just getting started. What kind of technology do they use? How are they going to help relieve some of the burden from you as far as unnecessary things that don't really do much for growing your site, but on an admin level, on an organization level can, like admin, like billing, like invoicing, like negotiating contracts, like doing business development. Those are things you need to consider as well. What kind of salary are you going to get? Are you getting more upfront as far as your sales price, or are you going to get more salary, or are you going to get more on the back end in the shares that you retain in the company? Anything the site network can do to drive profitability while it's still available should be looked at. And eventually, the site networks are going to drive down the take rates. It's just every industry goes through it. Technology is a deflationary force. Consolidation's a deflationary force. In our industry, it takes longer for that to occur. The CROs got to enjoy like 4 decades of huge take rates. It's only been recently that they've been getting those driven down. Therefore, they are innovating with technology and with acquiring sites. So sites might have 2 or 3 or 4 decades of growth ahead, which could be why the private equity are looking to get involved. So that's a little breakdown of the site networks. It's as best as I understand it, and I've been on probably 50 calls this year with different bankers, investment bankers, private equity groups, and I've been in serious talks with 5 groups. And God willing, if we can get the right deal on becoming the platform, we're going to do it, and you're certainly going to hear a lot more about me and from me going forward. And I might be talking to you about your site joining my network, but you always got to look out for what's best for yourself and how you could grow your site either independently, because there's no shame in being independent. Again, I'm on the fence about being independent. If I didn't have the platform and the podcast and the reach that I do, I might not ever even consider being the platform. I probably would never be considered to be the platform. But because of the megaphone that we have and our expertise, we're lucky enough to be considered. So remaining independent, no shame in that. Joining a site network towards the end, also no shame in that. Especially you've got to know yourself well and know your market, because at some point it's going to get super competitive in a lot of markets, and it's going to almost be mandatory to join the right site network. And then you've got to look at the company that you're joining, because you're betting in them just as much as they're betting in you. Like, subscribe, comment, share. I'll definitely be doing more videos about this as we get more info. Bye-bye. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.